Okay, I'm currently testing April 2023 on the Euro USD, and I am on the 4 hours chart. So April is actually between these two purple lines on my chart. So this zone here, this is the month of April. And if we should just look back a bit, we can see that we are actually in an uptrend with price keep making the lows strong and taking out the highs. Price is making weak highs and strong lows. Alright. And if you see the last structure I drew, we had this breakout structure. This is the low that took out this high, and this was the supply that actually facilitated the break of this high. So we would mark this zone because we expect it to still hold whenever price pulls back into this zone to facilitate the break of this structure, right? So I would just go back to the 30 minutes time frame. So let me just draw a line here so that we know that this is where we are. Now make this red. So let's go to the 30 minutes time frame. Now we jump back to April 7th. Okay. Now, where are we? Where is that line? Okay, this is the line. And this is our supply zone. So if we look at this zone is actually kind of big on the 30 minutes time frame. Now we can see that we have some mitigations within this zone. So if we refine this, we can actually get this block and we see another zone. I can copy this. We see another zone here. And if you should see this, what happens here? Price just gave a little reaction from this zone and ultimately broke this zone. And we see that price actually reacted from this zone here, this one. So what does that tell us? Uh, I'm also seeing something here on this zone. Alright, so we okay, let me just do it. Or should I? Let me just say it. Let me just say it. So we have this kind of candles here, right? Within this larger range, we have these smaller candles, and what do we have? We have sweep of liquidity of this zone, right? What then happens? Price pulls back, comes back into the zone, and then goes long. So we could have possible entry. We could have had something like this, a much more refined zone. Our stop loss this small, or the entry I would be looking at instead of keeping it that refined, no, more secured entry is something like this. So this is the low, and let's say our stop loss is 18 pips, right? Where would we be targeting? This was what I drew here, right? Let's just keep this like this. Where would we be targeting? We will be targeting this high, right? Because this is the 4 hours high, and this is just the 30 minutes forming higher highs and higher lows to facilitate this 4 hours high, right? And price ultimately broke structure at this zone in the 30 minutes, giving us this change of character, turning bearish to facilitate this 4 hours pullback into these zones. Right, so I'll just mark out this zone, and yeah, we're targeting these highs. So there and there. So looking at this, this is a risk entry. You see, we have had for 24 hours. That is a risk entry, but on a conservative entry, we had about 9 hours, which is still very, very good. All right. So now that price is actually at this zone, right? So where is that? Let's just mark it out and see. Right, price is at this zone. What do we expect? We expect a pullback, right? This is 30 minutes reconstruction. We expect a pullback. And where do we expect a pullback to? We expect a pullback into a supply zone that caused this breakout structure, just as we saw here. So I'm going to just delete this and delete this and delete this. All right. So if we should look at this, where do we have our supply zones? We have one over here, right? But we can see that that has been mitigated by this candle. Where do we have another one? Let me just go to the 4 hours and do this. 4 hours. Okay, so let me go back to April 7th. Where are we? Where are we? Okay, this is where we are. So in the 4 hours, we can have this zone here, right? We have that zone on the 4 hours, mitigated by where? This fractal candle, this fractal wick, sorry. Where do we have this mitigation next? Price came up here. See this? Broke it, came back, and we have another mitigation here, but several mitigations here, here, and here. Alright? So this is where we are. We also have this mitigation here. Uh, do we have this? We can also call this that zone, right? And then what happens after price breaks this on the 30 minutes, breaks this candle, and then breaks this high, and then starts to retrace, it's retracing very correctively into this zone. This is how we know that this zone is likely going to hold. Why? Whatever zone, when price comes back into a zone very correctively like this, it tends to hold. But when price just zooms in and zooms out like that, it tends to break. And see this, we are coming in, coming in, coming in. What happens here? We sweep liquidity, right? We sweep liquidity. Let me go to the 30 minutes time frame so that we can see it properly. April, let's go to April. Alright, so where are we? Okay, so this is where we are. Price is coming back very correctively. And what happens? Price sweeps liquidity at this point. And what happens? It tends to react. And what did that sweep of liquidity do ultimately? It gives us a minor change of character. You can even call it a change of character because technically this highs are closing. This we have candle closes above this highs, right? But then what happens? After closing that we expect a pullback, right? Price pulls back, and ultimately pulls back into the supply that led to that resulted from this sweep of liquidity. And on the 1 minute time frame, seeing that price has come back into this zone, we'll be looking for a change of character to the upside, which is actually a very good inducement into this zone, right? And what happens with that this zone also fails. So this was inducement into the market, right? And what do we see here? We see this another liquidity grab, right? Let me just change this liquidity. Let me call this liquidity. So we have seen that this is an inducement and that price would likely go higher. So we would look for possible supply zones that can actually hold. Now, if we refine this to, the minor, if we refine this zone to this, we can see that price just took out this liquidity here and went higher, hence spoiling the zone completely. And then we also see that as price was going, it was forming a trend line to the bottom. And if we draw this out, we see this trend line. This is what liquidity, right? This is liquidity. So what do we have here? We have this zone, right? It was mitigated. We can still refine it to this last candle. It was still mitigated. So we delete this out. Where else again do we have? We have this candle, right? And we see that this candle was actually mitigated by this zone, right? So we would refine it to these weeks, and we'll draw our trend line, our zone out. And what do we see? We see that price just tapped into this zone and took off, right? So on the 1 minute time frame, I would be looking for entries at this point to go high. So my entry will be here, stop loss somewhere here, right? Where would our TP be? Our TP would be, at this high, to break this high, expecting price to break this high. This is it. But then we see that no price never really got to this high. So probably when we saw a change of character here on the 1 minute time frame, we would have exited this position. But yeah, that is it. Let me just see. Yes. Alright, so that is my analysis for the month of April. Also, from this high here, you could have also looked for 1 minute entry, into this zone. So ride this pullback, ride this up, and even as we're going up here, we could have still, stacked our positions. So after price went out from here, price came back, you know, went out again, price came back, went out again, price came back. So we stack our positions up to this point, and then also look for a way to ride this back down into this zone. So that would have been our play for April.